Florence Anthony was once a mixed-race child in Tucson, Arizona. Part Japanese, African-American, Irish, Choctaw Chickasaw, Cheyenne, and Comanche, the girl would one day reject her given name and the biological father who shared it, choosing the name Ai Ogawa, meaning love stream in Japanese. This assertion of one's created self is what imbues her poetry with such conviction and drives the form that she chooses for each work. The characteristic most evident of Ai's work is the use of persona. Using personas like masks, Ai seeks to break down the barriers of racial identity and reveal universal truths and emotions. Frequent topics of sex, violence, and death are used to connect all peoples through their most fundamental emotions, and to highlight that in the midst of these primeval actions are elements of love, faith, forgiveness, and hope. The first-person persona in her poetry is rarely, if ever, herself. After all, she was never an Irish immigrant, a 12-year-old boy, or passed for white in Louisiana. Yet she utilizes her own racial diversity to create characters and tell mesmerizing stories. In I'm the Only One Here, Ai completely upends the reader, leading us to think we are following the story of a slave ship centuries ago. I was smuggled to America, begin some 20 lines of deprivation below decks, before the speaker reveals the truth. By the way, I forgot to introduce myself. I am Manesh. In New Delhi, I was a scholar of philosophy. In fact, we are reading the modern-day story of an Indian escaping family jealousy to come illegally to the United States, smuggled in a container. While my remaining rupees paid my way to this gloomy afternoon in New York City, where I drive a taxi. With a few brief lines, Ai has sucked us in to be sympathetic to a seemingly kidnapped African slave, but with a kind of sleight of hand using persona, a mask covering a mask, our stereotypes and expectations are broken down. Right in the middle of the poem, when it's too late to take it back, our compassion and pity and guilt are aroused, but now must be turned toward an illegal immigrant who is suddenly visible and real to us in a way we would not voluntarily have allowed before. Ai has switched both our expectations of the persona and the time period to manipulate our sympathies in a new direction. Ai's poetry ultimately seeks to understand the human mind and the relationship between what people say and what they do. The voice in the poem is always that of the person speaking, being brutalized, or the one drawn down to the horror and the shame. The speaker is often flat, seemingly apathetic, and Ai's own poetry readings reflect this dispassionate quality as she recites her own words in a trance-like manner. Consider The Good Shepherd.
I lift the boy's body from the trunk, set it down, then push it over the embankment with my foot. I watch it roll down into the river and feel I'm rolling with it, feel the first cold slap of the water, wheeze and fall down on one knee. So tired, so cold, Lord, I need a new coat, not polyester, but wool, new and pure, like the little lamb I killed tonight.
Ai uncannily taps into emotions that all human beings share, primeval emotions that lay at our very foundations, and ones we are quick to cover over. Ai's poems are universal in the way they depict hope, disillusionment, desire, reconciliation, and separation. All of these qualities are found in Passing Through, where I dons the persona of African American, half white and so pale as to be ridiculed by both sides. "If it wasn't for hell, we'd all be tap dancing with the devil," Mama Rose used to say. "But as it is, we just stand and watch while someone else burns up before salvation." The poem continues to tell the story of Bertha's escape from the South. "Throwing off her ragged clothes as she goes, until she's as naked as the day she was born. When she comes to washing, hanging on the line, she grabs a fine dress and keeps on running." Bertha mimics I's own creation of self, changing people's perception of her, and therefore her future. The throwing away of her clothes is the stripping off of her old self, as she adopts a new identity, as easily as stealing clothes off the line. After a life of passing for white in the city, Bertha puts her three-quarter white daughter on a bus back to Mama Rose. The charade is going to be played out again as the granddaughter finishes, "Mama Rose knew me, though, blind as she was. 'What color are you, gal?' she asked, and I told her, 'I'm as black as last night.' That's how I passed, without asking permission." Passing Through is layered with themes of heredity, identity, choices, and the compromises people make to fit into their family groups and the world around them. Another strong personality is met in Sisterhood, the tale of an Irish girl who goes on a similar voyage of self-discovery, rejecting her origins, trying on different personas, and then returning and using a simple lie to fit in and get what she wants. I uses humor and an Irish brogue to bring this woman to life. She left the convent, "You could say I broke the habit," and goes to New York, tossing her rosary and her faith overboard. "Sure, and didn't it float upon the water a full 3 minutes before it sank?" After a time, in the very bosom of sin, even conversing with Elvis Presley in Las Vegas, the former nun returns home to Ireland and re-enters the church. Still mourning the loss of her unborn child, she discovers an abandoned baby near the confessional. Taking it to the priest, they disagree on whether it's a miracle or a sin. Then, looking hard at me, he said, "She's your daughter, isn't she?" I answered, "Yes, I was only trying to do what was best for her." And so I made my escape to motherhood. Or was it a retreat? Again, a quick lie changes the direction of a life, or two, and bows its head to the label society insists on giving it. Most noted for their brutal nature in poems, like The Good Shepherd, 20-Year Marriage, and The Mortician's 12-year-old son, these address deviant, abusive, even criminal behavior. For I's subjects, though, sex is merely an escape, a mask itself to hide the misery of a relationship. It's often depicted as a habit or a necessity, with an illusory intimacy that ultimately changes nothing. The poet herself made the ultimate designation in an interview with American Poetry Observed. The distinction between my sex and violence poems and others you might read is that in mine, the characters love each other. The poems are not hate poems. Many of her personas are seeking transformation or salvation, doing so through violent acts. However, there are lessons to be learned from her personas that can prevent similar occurrences, if only the reader will take heed. Even when she uses the voice of a famous figure, she presents a version of the truth. Since no one can know the truth of Elvis Presley, Jimmy Hoffa, General Custer, or James Dean, I's version of events may as well be a version of the truth we can learn from. I's characters are about becoming something more. As if focusing a lens for a brief time, she forces our attention completely and utterly on a specific soul experiencing a specific pain that we feel at our essence. Regardless of our acquaintance with the race, gender, time, or troubles of the speaker. What her individuals say expresses more about the American psyche and struggling nature than about the individuals themselves. I uses her personal family tree and her quest for self-definition to influence her work and question individual and societal expectations. The revolving characters and constant striving for understanding takes the reader on a breathtaking journey that is sure to change them forever.